Welcome to Midnight Casebook, where every shadow hides a secret and every mystery begs to be solved. Tonight, we unravel the chilling tale of Sherlock Holmes and the clock that counted backwards, a fan-made story. We'd love to have you along for this enigmatic journey. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Share your theories, and if you spot any inconsistencies, don't hesitate to call them out. Your keen eyes and sharp minds help us craft even more captivating mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. A Murder in Plain Sight. A blood-curdling scream shattered the stately silence of Halcyon House, reverberating through the opulent halls and rattling the ancient crystal chandeliers that dangled like solemn witnesses to the unfolding terror. The guests, gathered beneath the grand arches adorned with lavish silk drapery, froze mid-conversation, their laughter swiftly swallowed by the spectre of horror that loomed forth. It was Lady Agatha Browning, the eminent hostess and close friend of the late Sir Reginald Ballinger, who stood framed against the doorway of the locked study, her hand clasped to her mouth, eyes wide in disbelief. "He's dead. I found him. Dead." With each word she uttered, the vibrant hues of the evening dimmed, casting shadows into the corners of an otherwise splendid affair. The steady patter of rain against the tall windows grew louder as the evening wore on. The gathering was testament to Sir Reginald's status, a mix of socialites, influential businessmen, and the occasional artist, all entangled by webs of pretense and ambition. Yet now, with the body of their host discovered in his own sanctum, his carefully curated study filled with mahogany shelves of leather-bound tomes and scattered papers, the mask of elegance slipped away, revealing the grotesque treachery beneath. As the doors slammed shut, sealing them within the house, a sense of claustrophobic dread settled over the guests. Miss Jane Marple, seated in an inconspicuous corner with her knitting, looked up, her grey eyes reflecting an unexpected glint of intrigue. A self-described observer of the human condition, she had come to Halcyon House not merely for the evening's entertainment, but to witness the illustrious interplay of social dynamics. Now, however, the evening bore the heavy air of tragedy. She observed each face for subtle shifts and unguarded moments, each piece of tensed laughter and stifled breath becoming critical threads in a larger tapestry she was determined to unravel. She could feel the unspoken exclamations ricochet around the room, suspicions settling like soot. Lady Browning, in her state of hysteria, shouted for Mr. Sebastian Drummond, the estate's steadfast butler, who arrived immediately, his composure as unyielding as the polished silverware gleaming beneath the dining-room candelabras. "Lady Agatha, calm yourself," he said, the very timbre of his voice demanding attention. "We must investigate thoroughly. Sir Reginald was last seen in the library before we arrived at dinner. Is this not so?" the guests murmured, offering half-formed recollections of their whereabouts, one confessing to pouring champagne, another amidst animated debate in the drawing-room. Each response so carefully rehearsed, so unyielding. "Who could have done such a thing?" mused Lady Clarissa Finch, her lavender dress swishing dramatically as she turned, her fan fluttering like a heart, half in terror and half in delight. "Surely, none of us here." But her voice trailed off under the weight of her own unconvincing reassurance. Miss Marple's gaze shifted from her pale, envious features to the floor, where a soft imprint of dampness marked a trail leading directly to the study door. Her keen instincts pricked at her conscience. The guests' alibis would be forged in artifice just as much as their lives. "I could swear I heard a thud before the scream," a voice piped up from the back, and Miss Marple shifted her attention to Mr. Carl Hargrove, the controversial playwright known for his knack for spinning dark tales. "It was quite faint," he continued, "but then again, my nerves have been known to betray me in moments of stress." The glimmer in his dark eyes betrayed more. Was it a willingness to share shadows of guilt, or merely the delight of spectacle behind the veil of tragedy? As the guests became increasingly agitated, Miss Marple observed Drummond's unwavering presence. "Do you mind if I take a look inside?" she asked him, her voice laced with a gentle authority. His brow furrowed slightly, uncertainty rippling through him, though he quietly conceded, "Very well, but be cautious." But as she stepped into the study, the very air within felt heavy, cloaked in the scent of musty old books and something more sinister. Sir Reginald lay sprawled against his desk, a letter opener thrust into his chest, the gleaming blade stark against the rich brocade of his smoking jacket. The once pristine papers were now a chaotic medley of last-minute drafts and scrawled notations, with one sheet containing the hastily jotted names of his most trusted acquaintances. Miss Marple noted a slight smudge of ink on the edge of the letter that bore a name that caught her attention. Florence Wellings, resentful perhaps over Sir Reginald's refusal to fund her project. The discoveries continued to churn within Miss Marple's mind, but a sudden sound from behind her, a chair scraping against the wooden floor, made her heart leap. She turned to find the looming figure of Lady Finch entering the room, her expression one of calculated determination, yet she neglected to close the door behind her. "What are you doing in here, Miss Marple?" she challenged, voice laced with irritation, masking a deeper unease. But before Miss Marple could respond, another echo reverberated through the house, a smashing sound that sliced through the tension. Somewhere in the distance, a bottle shattered as if heralding the arrival of further peril. They weren't merely trapped by physical walls. The fetid air of deceit had entrenched them deeper and deeper into their own facades of respectability. And as another scream echoed from below, the guests propelled themselves into an unforeseen horror. The first victim was just the beginning. A chilling thought settled over Miss Marple. How many more bodies might there be hidden within the confounding halls of Halcyon House, ensconced by the fractured trust of those who dared share its secrets? She was determined to find out, but as Lady Finch's shadow lingered ominously over her, Miss Marple felt the air grow heavy with dread, recognizing that one among them might wish for nothing more than to ensure no one survived to learn the truth. Chapter 2. The Clock That Counted Backwards. The grandfather clock in the corner of the study began to chime ominously, the resonant toll echoing off the aged wood and velvet draperies, casting a shroud of tension that seemed to grip every heart in Halcyon House. As Miss Marple turned, the chilling sound dislodged a deep-seated dread, an echo of foreboding that reverberated far beyond the simple confines of timekeeping. Just then, a high, frantic scream cut through the thick air. Another scream, this one tinged with panic, snatched away the remnants of calm. Miss Marple stepped back instinctively, her keen intuition alerting her to the impending descent into chaos. "Sebastian! Sebastian!" Lady Finch shrieked from outside the doorway, her voice trembling. "It's Mrs. Cavendish. She's collapsed on the floor. We need help." The urgency in her tone was enough to send a ripple of anxiety through the gathering, and the guests, whose sophisticated facades began to crack, surged toward the commotion outside the study, their jeweled gowns and tailored suits momentarily forgotten in the tide of hysteria. Remaining steadfast amid the turmoil, Miss Marple inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the grim reality before her. The study felt unshaken, almost claustrophobic, and she turned her attention back to the body sprawled across the desk, as though drawn inexorably to the lifeless form of Sir Reginald. It seemed absurd, yet she felt time itself had unraveled the very moment his life ebbed away, a stifled gasp for breath, amid the cadence of the clock's chimes. Waving away the vision of panic from her mind, Miss Marple stepped closer to the desk, where the scattered sheets lay in disarray. Among them was a single, crumpled envelope, a stark interruption against the chaos, its wax seal unmistakable and still intact. Compelled by an urgency she could scarcely explain, she pried it free and peeled it open, her fingers trembling slightly as the contents revealed a hastily inscribed letter inside. Dearest Sir Reginald, if you are reading this, I fear it is too late to prevent the inevitable. My intentions were never to cause you harm, but you must understand, time is slipping away, and myriad threats lurk in the shadows of your trust. Trust not even those closest to you. The clock, our old friend, holds more secrets than we dare imagine. Yours most sincerely, Florence W. The name struck like a band struck off paper. Florence Wellings. Miss Marple pressed the letter to her chest, her heart racing, as she sensed the significance of the words she had just absorbed. It hinted at more than simple financial disagreements. It was a desperate cry from the grave, wrapped in cryptic warnings. Her instincts flared. Had Sir Reginald received this too late? Or had he disregarded it, overconfident in his secure world of affluence and allies? The clock chimed again, reverberating through the layers of doubt that now coated her thoughts, mingling with the residual fear still thrumming in the air. Lady Finch's earlier inquiry about who could have possibly committed such a heinous act now began to materialize as a chilling realization. Someone must have known of that letter. Had it orchestrated this sinister event? Miss Marple turned, her gaze catching the flicker of movement outside the study. Lady Agatha Browning stood just beyond the threshold, her delicate hands clasped tightly, an expression of confusion splayed across her face, as if her view of reality was fracturing before her very eyes. A flicker of guilt, perhaps, or simply shock. Either way, she was a woman at the center of this storm. Before Miss Marple could draw her conclusions, another chilling sound interrupted the unfolding tension. The clock swung forward, the pendulum swaying dramatically as if driven by forces unseen. It struck again, echoing through the house, a rhythm that seemed to mimic a heartbeat. "What is happening?" Lady Browning's voice trembled. "Why is it so dark? Will someone please tell me what's going on?" Miss Marple's instinct led her to the clock, and she realized it was not merely a timepiece. It was a beacon, an unassuming herald of their doom. She inspected its ornate face, laden with carvings and a beautiful patina, but noticed something peculiar. The time was precisely 38 minutes to the hour, far removed from the chaos stirring around her. Intriguingly, the hands pointed backward, though the chimes resounded forebodingly with every passing moment. Before she could ponder further, she heard hushed voices drifting through the open door, a sinister whisper shared between Lady Finch and Mr. Drummond just outside. "We must keep this under wraps. Agatha cannot know what we truly found. What we must do now," Lady Finch implored, her voice a deliberate hiss. The mention of Lady Browning's name sent a chill down Miss Marple's spine. What had they discovered? What dark truths lurked beyond the innocent veneer of friendship? "Let us not," Forget what is at stake here, Drummond replied, his tone deeply reserved, yet thick with an underlying current of menace. Any disturbance will have dire consequences. The clock chimed yet again, drowning their words, but imprinting their gravity upon Miss Marple's mind, almost as though it stood sentinel, guarding secrets accumulated through decades of trust and manipulation. "Ladies, come here." Miss Marple's voice cut through the fears encasing her thoughts, her tone commanding and clear. They turned to her, dread seeped into the air, electrifying the atmosphere. "I believe I have uncovered something damning," but a sudden thud interrupted her, the cacophony eclipsing her words as the grandfather clock struck once more, and from the depths of the hallway, the figure of Mrs. Cavendish came stumbling in, pale and breathless. "He's coming! He's coming!" she gasped, eyes wide with terror, her hand clutching a crumpled piece of paper that glimmered ominously in the dim light. The room fell silent, every gaze fixed upon her as if she were a living embodiment of doom. The letter in Miss Marple's hand felt heavy, the clock counting backward as if to remind them. Time was not on their side. A rush of instinct surged within her. A maelstrom of revelations awaited, and with the next ticking chime could come the death knell for anyone who dared unravel the secrets intertwined with the clock's relentless pulse. The sound of shuffling feet echoed nearby. They were no longer merely guests in a house of misfortune. They were now pawns in a game where the stakes were death, and one final chilling thought resonated in Miss Marple's mind. Who among them truly understood the clock that counted backwards? The scattered pages on the floor lay still as death, their secrets buried beneath the weight of what had just transpired. A dreadfully dull thud, followed by a strangled gasp, disseminated throughout the crowd and froze Miss Marple in place. It wasn't until the broad sweep of Lady Finch's arm stumbled against a nearby table, sending a small glass figurine crashing to the ground, that the murmurs of confusion turned to chaos. "He's coming!" Mrs. Cavendish's piercing voice bounced off the walls, fraught with horror, adding to the mounting din like kindling to an already raging fire. Who is coming?" Miss Marple asked, her voice calm yet tinged with urgency, as she stepped toward the frantic figure, trying to peel back the layers of turmoil. The room, laden with shadows and the ephemeral scent of fear, was deceptively tranquil beside the tempest outside, where rain began to pour down in sheets, darkening the window panes, reminding all inside of the claustrophobic nature of their peril. "He wears a coat, a dark coat, and his eyes, they are like pools of shadow," Mrs. Cavendish stammered as she staggered backwards. Her wild gestures and heightened breath seemed almost theatrical, but bore the heavy gravitas of impending doom. From the corners of the room, anxious glances exchanged quickened pulses as Miss Marple resisted the urge to indulge in their unvoiced whispers. She noted Lady Finch exchanging a swift look with Mr. Drummond, one laden with hidden meanings, an alliance coalesced in fear. Were they aware of something she had missed? The undercurrents of conversation faded as the guests jostled closer together, their once proud facades surrendering to dread, a communal confession that they had become entangled in a conspiracy bigger than simple jealousy or ambition. As Miss Marple approached the shivering woman, the rain intensified, beating drums against the windows, an ominous rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the beat of her own heart. She couldn't help but recall her earlier observations, the envelope in her pocket, the crumpled paper, and Lady Finch's whispered words, fragments that suggested subterranean currents of underlying motives within Halcyon House, swaying like the clock's pendulum, always pointing towards secrets. "Mrs. Cavendish," Miss Marple implored gently, her keen blue eyes boring into the woman's dilated pupils. "What exactly did you see? Speak plainly." "The shadow." Mrs. Cavendish grasped desperately at her words. "It loomed. In the hall, I swear, not far from the study. And it whispered, oh, it whispered dark things, about an heir who vanished long ago." With that fragment of revelation, a jigsaw piece clicked into place in Miss Marple's mind. She recalled the whispers fluttering through the village's cobbled streets, the trailing gossip of Lady Agatha's recent endeavours, and Sir Reginald's fraught ties with a legacy that seemed to entwine itself relentlessly around any discussion of inheritance. The scattered names written on the note beside the fallen body now began to breathe. Mingling with Florence's, a missing heir would stir the motives further. Amidst the clamour of suspects, who among them bore the burden of a truth that could dismantle their world? The guests, once smoothly adorned in charming attire, stood now in disarray, their true selves unveiled before the brewing tempest. Miss Marple's mind swirled with renewed questions as she turned toward the door, only to come face to face with Lady Browning, her eyes wide and beseeching. "Miss Marple, did you hear? Sebastian, has he been what?" Miss Marple pressed, unable to mask the urgency in her voice. "Missing," Lady Browning's words hung in the air like smoke. "He hasn't returned. He said he would fetch something from the grounds." "Fetch what?" The inquiry slipped between them like a wisp of smoke, but the storm raged beyond the facade of Halcyon House, nurturing an instinctive fear that told Miss Marple that every moment brought them closer to a revelation. "Something important, I believe. Sir Reginald's—" Lady Browning's sentence wafted away, her gaze sliding away, acknowledging something unspoken just beyond the threshold of their conversation. The encroaching murmur of voices pulled Miss Marple's attention back to the darkened hallway, now appearing as a void harbouring confusion and secrets. Something lurked within its recesses. As thought turned to action, she gathered her clutch of courage, confidence in her instincts, tracing the shadows as they flickered at the doorway. Perhaps it was Lady Finch's heightened awareness that had pushed her comrades to clumsily conceal something, or maybe Drummond's uneasy countenance was more than just shock. Suddenly, a distant sound reached her ears, a soft rustling that pulled at her curiosity. "Stay here!" Miss Marple gestured sharply to Mrs. Cavendish and Lady Browning, glancing back at the still cluster of guests, too agitated to truly listen. As she crept toward the shadowed opening, the faintest silhouette danced across the dimness, a figure retreating, perhaps escaping the unfolding chaos. The detective spirit in her flared to life. What was left unguarded must be inspected, for only in the revealing light of confrontation could truth be unveiled. With each step, resonating like the heartbeat of the house, she dared to call, "Who goes there?" The echo of her voice sent musty air swirling back at her, mingled with the dampness of rain that dripped through the unsealed windows. It was a daring gamble, hoping to bring the spectre, and perhaps an answer, into view. As she pressed closer, a sudden scream ripped through the layers of conversation, halting her heartbeat, freezing her in place. From the shadows, a man stumbled into the glimmer of the lantern light, collapsing forward with a gusting breath. His coat, heavy with the rain, carried with it an air of familiarity. Yet it was the wildness in his eyes that ignited every alarm within Miss Marple. "Sebastian!" Lady Browning cried, rushing toward him. But as he faltered, revealing a crumpled piece of paper clutched tightly within his palm. Miss Marple realized the abysmal truth draping over them all. Perhaps he'd returned with answers, but the question clung heavily in her mind. Were they ready to face whatever darkness the shadows of suspicion now unveiled? Chapter 4. The Will That Was Never Signed. The air shattered with a piercing scream that echoed through the dim confines of Halcyon House, reverberating off the walls like a sinister bell tolling for the damned. Miss Marple whipped around, her heart hammering in her chest as the figure of Lady Browning staggered back, her hand instinctively darting to graze her throat. "Sebastian!" she cried again, her voice laden with confusion and dread. The fractured lamplight flickered in the panic-stricken room, shadows dancing across the walls like wraiths summoned from some ancient depth of despair. With a swift gesture, Miss Marple moved toward the fallen man, now sprawled on the floor, rain-soaked and seemingly unconscious. As she knelt beside him, the damp fabric of his coat clung like a second skin, the scent of the storm mingling with the musty air of the house. Her fingers traced the torn edge of a crumpled page protruding from his tightly clasped fist, slick with perspiration. What secrets lay locked away in this frail armor? "What have you found, dear boy?" she murmured, leaning closer as she turned her sharp gaze toward his pale countenance. Beneath the wildness, she recognized a suffocating fear, a whisper of knowledge that could unlock the house's myriad mysteries. "The will," he said. "The will," he gasped, his words tumbling out like pebbles down a steep slope. "I couldn't. The library, it's gone." The intensity of his voice contrasted starkly with the oppressive quietude that had settled, as if a blanket had been thrown over the chaos. In that moment, the clock chimed again, its rhythm sinister and somber, prompting a sense of urgency within Miss Marple. The missing will, had it truly vanished into thin air, or had it been hidden away, perhaps deliberately? Her mind shifted gears as she considered the implications. Inheritance was a thorny issue, particularly amid the gathering of an inheritance-laden past, redolent with betrayal and longing. Glancing at Lady Finch, her expression paled, but her eyes glimmered with calculated resolve. "What did you find, Sebastian?" Lady Browning knew not just the weight of words, but also the heat of suspicion, drawing every gaze towards the culmination of their unraveling world. Miss Marple caught Lady Finch's evasive look shooting across the room, where Mr. Drummond stood, his jaw clenched, an ardent protector of secrets, holding a statue she now recognized as a symbol of family lineage, each crumb of detail offering a possible pathway to motivations concealed beneath the surface. Could it be, she posited quietly, her eyes darting around the tense gathering, that a will not signed could uproot ties forged explicitly, dishonoring loyalty, favoring means of darker intentions? "Do not speak of these fanciful notions, Miss Marple," Lady Finch smirked, yet there was an undercurrent of anxiety scratching at her facade, eliciting a glint of glee for the detective. "What do we know of wills? Perhaps the family has merely decided to keep such matters private. It is not uncommon." "Oh, but common is exactly where shadows loom," Miss Marple pressed on, her heart quickening with the thrill of deduction. The conversation shifted, brightened but also littered with unease, their fractured trust captivatingly clear now. "There's something deeper beneath this twisting riddle, the mention of an heir, a displaced right, the story of a vanished will, shrouded in layers, carefully constructed." The clock's ominous chiming interrupted their ebb and flow yet again, as the weight of their collective suspicions felt heavier. Perhaps we should search the library, suggested Lady Browning, her voice trembling but resolute. If there are remnants of truth left in these walls. With the errant thought stuck in her mind, Miss Marple nodded firmly, gathering her composure as she consolidated the frantic energies within the room. Very well, let us venture forth then. Insight often lies hidden in the most innocuous places. As they turned toward the entrance of the library, she overheard a muffled exchange between Lady Finch and Mr. Drummond. "We can't let her meddle too deeply. It's already slipping from our grasp," she hissed, the sinister implication clawed at Miss Marple's intuition. The library door creaked open, the scent of old leather volumes and dust filling the air. The flickering lamps cast long shadows against the mahogany shelves lined with tomes whispering secrets, a fitting backdrop to the masks each guest wore, crumbling under scrutiny. As Miss Marple began her search, running her fingers along the spines of countless books, the atmosphere thickened, the very air heavy with unspoken conflict. "Over here," Lady Browning prompted suddenly, indication of a scattering of papers, one corner fluttering like a captured moth, a solemn message of what lay hidden. Miss Marple swept into the moment, her heartbeat quickening as she approached to inspect the object laid on the polished surface of a nearby table. As she reached for it, an agitated gust from outside sent the window rattling, drawing attention to the ominous storm brewing beyond, punctuating the urgency in the room with its echoes. "Do look," Lady Browning breathed. "It seems a map. But of what?" The rain continued to lash against the windows, sharp and unrelenting, as Miss Marple's fingers trembled at the torn page, a small name not fully deciphered, but nonetheless illuminating. Hargrove. It reverberated through her, thoughts like a pin dropped in silence. It rang familiar. The name whispered in trivial bouts around village corners, drawing them together, and yet it bore a weight larger than she had dared to acknowledge. "Sebastian, you saw something." She turned urgently to the man, now sitting against a wall, his features shadowed but resolute. "What can you remember? Was this the name spoken that night?" "But there's so much," he stammered, his voice strong but strained. "And it all leads back to the night of the storm and the one who vanished." His words lingered in the room thick like tar, and the truth was now too close and too far, threatening to rip their very fabric asunder. The clock struck too loudly, 18 minutes to midnight, and with that crisp echo, Miss Marple felt a recognition, blossom akin to fear. "Bring the others," she snapped suddenly, urgency replacing her calm demeanor. "Now." Before she could speak further, the house echoed with a thunderous crash, glass breaking and reverberating with an ominous finality, shaking the very core of their mission. A figure dashed from the shadows, slight and urgent, choking back a scream. It mattered little who or how, a marker of every suppressed secret rushing forth into the rain-laden chaos. "Miss Marple," it cried in desperation, a harbinger of revelation now perilously sharp against the flickering shadows of uncertainty. The storm may pour, but what lurked beneath the surface was even worse, carving out visions of dread. As the guests turned to Miss Marple, clutching remnants of mended civility, they bristled against the unknown, just waiting to be unseated. The truth of the will that was never signed hung in the air, a spectre, echoing the very words Miss Marple had long felt cradled in her mind, a terrible, paralyzing thrill, a stripped truth awaiting their next breath to yield. And then she stilled, for the fishes of companionship, integrity, and feigned loyalty began to unravel, listing them toward a truth too terrible to comprehend. Something had shifted irrevocably within Halcyon House, and it would take little more than a breath to unveil what lay behind the deadened walls, a revelation that could change everything they thought they knew. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Suspect. A bone-chilling scream echoed through the dimly lit hallways of Halcyon House, snapping Miss Marple's attention away from her doubtful musings, the air heavy with foreboding. A scream, sharp and visceral, rising above the rain, pounding against the windows like the frantic heartbeat of the house itself. Rain trickled down the glass, distorting the flickering light from the lamps, a spectre of something darker lurking just beyond sight. Miss Marple's heart quickened as she turned towards the source of the terror, her sharp mind racing through the possible implications of such a disturbance. The last vestiges of civility were fraying, and for every guest, the shadows bore witness to murmurs rising like fog from the ground, sharp with treachery. As she made her way toward the sound, she found Lady Finch, ashen-faced and trembling, standing absurdly still in the doorway of the drawing-room. "It's gone," she gasped, her voice a mere whisper caught in the storm's raging breath. "Gone?" Miss Marple echoed, astonishment twisting her features. "Gone? As in, vanished?" Lady Finch, visibly shaken, nodded slowly, eyes darting behind her, where the remnants of the group struggled to maintain their composure. The weight of their suspicions pressed upon the room like a pall, as though the dim light had become suffocating. "Sebastian is missing," the lady whispered incredulously, casting her gaze back toward the guests. "I saw him only moments ago, but now—" Miss Marple's keen gaze flickered, taking in the anxious expressions, their eyes flitting away from one another in a dance of accusation and fear. "And wherein did you see him last?" Slowly, her heart began to race anew, instincts sharpening. She stepped forward as if to draw the truth out of the suspenseful room. Lady Finch gestured towards the staircase that spiraled seductively upwards, shadows pooling at its base like ink spilling over paper. "By the library," Lady Finch replied, an edge of uncertainty creeping into her voice. "I thought he was headed to—" "To discover the hidden will," Miss Marple interjected, her eyes narrowing perceptibly. "We must act quickly. It's imperative we know who may have urged him out of sight." The air crackled with unspoken threats and lingering questions as they hastened toward the library door, though ominous echoes of the storm seemed to retreat and leer in the tightening space. Inside the library, the atmosphere bore the musty scent of aged paper and secrets. The rain drummed steadily against the windows, each patter a reminder of the disquiet growing beneath the gathered facade of admiration and pretense. A corridor of books beckoned, a glimpse of history scattered across its wooden shelves. Miss Marple wasted no time in hurrying past the titles, scanning the walls laden with unyielding knowledge, where shadows hinted at undetermined truths. She had gleaned enough to know that knowledge often hid within layers. A simple map might reveal hidden depths, while a missing piece could summon an avalanche of shadows. "Check behind the drapes," she instructed as she rummaged through tomes, ran her fingers along bindings worn with time, their surfaces whispering in the silence. "He may have thought to hide there," she added. "All manners of concealing secrets begin with what one deems indispensable." Lady Browning, intent on her instructions, reached behind the heavy drapes, her hands fluttering like moths against surfaces that had been untouched for ages. Just as the tension in the room escalated, a resounding crash echoed across the hall, a sound too great to belong to mere wind. "What was that?" Lady Finch gasped, jerking back as a dreadful silence filled the space, every heartbeat now amplified with anxiety. Miss Marple turned sharply, her instincts igniting. She could sense the undercurrents playing beneath this meticulous design of deceit. "The others," she declared, tone resolute. "We must unify our search for Sebastian and inspect the premises." The gathered guests filed in, apprehensive expressions drawing tight across their features as they gripped onto the threads of their nerves. The library seemed to swell, the atmosphere fraught with dread. "He could be anywhere," Mr. Drummond snapped, frustration leaking through a near-quivering facade. "What are we even searching for?" "I suggest we each recount the last moments before we heard the scream," Miss Marple declared, her voice cutting through the tension, as sharp as glass. "What can we remember about Sebastian's actions prior to his disappearance? What might he have seen?" A subdued murmur of voices flitted through the crowd, uncertainty rippling through the assembled group. Lady Browning described a fleeting shadow she glimpsed earlier in the dim light, her gaze darting between the others. "He was standing close to the windows," she murmured. "I assumed he was looking outside." "Outside," Miss Marple mused, her mind weaving through maze after maze of possibilities, her eyes searching the room. Wouldn't a view of the encroaching storm beyond be inviting enough for nerves on edge? Quickened breaths hinted at a gathering horizon of fear, and someone had chosen to exploit it. Choices were made here: self-interest, jealousy, dangling fragile threads in the storm's embrace. That's when the argument began. A voice cut through the noise, low and brittle. All heads turned to Mr. Drummond in quiet inquiry. "I overheard Sebastian and Lady Finch arguing. Just before all of this," he gestured wildly at the surroundings. "I didn't want to say it was about the inheritance." Lady Finch's expression twisted, fury leaking like poison into the air. "How dare you accuse me of foul play, Drummond? I have been as supportive as anyone." "Supportive?" he hissed back, a flicker of something darker igniting in the smoldering exchange, anger mixing with fear. The storm outside raged on, rain pelting the windows. Thunder rolled across the night sky, offering rumblings of despair. Miss Marple's breath quickened, her mind racing, absorbing the frantic exchange as angles reflected doubt and eminently pressing guilt. Several taunting questions paraded before her. Each suspect's motives showed through their cracked facades, sharpening focus as she realized the true nature of their snug gathering. Somehow, in the thick of it all, one among them had simply vanished into thin air. "Lady Finch, you had motive, but what of you, Drummond?" she pressed, leveling her gaze on him. "What secrets did you hope to keep veiled as well? Was your argument with Sebastian just innocent misunderstanding? I think not." Her voice reverberated through the chamber, sending a shiver among the company, as if exposing a hidden serpent in the coiled shadows, ready to strike. Suddenly, a deafening crash resonated from the top of the staircase, the muffled thud of something heavy collapsing. The room went still. Heavy footsteps announced an intruder, someone breaching the doorway. The gasping bosom of air, again filled with dread, sliced through a mirage of whispered explanations and hazy alibis. Miss Marple turned sharply, noticing a silhouette lurking at the entranceway. "Who goes there?" she called, steeling herself against the fear that gnawed at the edges of her certainty. The figure moved unnaturally, dropping something metallic that glinted in the dim light. Was it a key, or perhaps a dagger, designed to cut deeper into blades of tension? As the echoes of confusion filled Halcyon House, revealing fractured alliances, Miss Marple felt the delicate balance of truth slide like grains of sand between her fingers. "Sebastian!" she cried out, glancing upwards where the shadows lingered. But silence filled their hearts, for the storm raged outside and within. A darker theft had begun, and in the heart of it all, mystery swirled like smoke, waiting to engulf them all. In that moment, Halcyon House felt irretrievable, a fortress of secrets spiraling back to the labyrinthine paths opened by doubt, a deadly game of deception poised to ignite. The lightning flashed, the truth would come to light, but at what cost? The connections between each player grew taut, choosing to dance around the web, and Miss Marple knew she was perilously close to unraveling a carefully spun thread that could collapse the house of cards around them. "Bring Sebastian back," she shrieked into the rain-soaked abyss, her voice swallowed by the thunder, feeling time itself tighten, coiling for a revelation destined to strike. Thus, Chapter 6. In the shadows of Halcyon House. A muffled thud reverberated through the darkened attic, slicing through the storm's ceaseless howl like a knife through fog. Miss Marple, heart racing, rushed towards the sound, propelled by an instinct that told her something catastrophic lay hidden behind the old wooden door at the end of the dim corridor. Its paint was peeling, whispers of the past trapped within the grain like a secret longing to escape. She hesitated only a moment, her knuckles brushing against the cold metal doorknob, then pushed the door open with a groan that resonated loudly in the small, intimate space. The attic had not seen visitors in years. Dust motes danced in the thin sliver of light that broke through the cracked window, illuminating stacks of forgotten relics draped in sheets. A sense of antiquity clung to the air, mingling with mustiness and the electrical tension that permeated Halcyon House. But what seized Miss Marple's attention was neither the rich tapestry of cobwebs nor the relics of days gone by. It was the unmistakable outline of a figure slumped against an upturned chair amidst the debris. "Catherine," Miss Marple gasped, recognizing Lady Finch's maid, the sweet but timid girl who served with a kindness rarely acknowledged. The girl stirred at the sound of her voice, her wide eyes reflecting terror and confusion, as if she had ventured too far into the darkness from which she could not return. "What happened?" Miss Marple approached, cautiously, stepping over broken crates and the shards of forgotten lives. Catherine's face was pale, her lips trembling. He's gone," she stammered, pointing into the shadows where a small, ornate trunk lay slightly ajar, its contents spilling out in a disarray of crumpled papers. "He was here, I swear it." She drew a trembling breath, savoring the remnants of a heavy secret overshadowed by anxiety. "Sebastian, he came here to look for something." "Something?" Miss Marple pressed, her mind already darting through the possibilities. With deliberate movements, she crossed the room and began sifting through the clutter, glancing knowingly at Catherine, who appeared conflicted by loyalty and dread. "Did he say what he was looking for?" "It was an old journal, Miss Marple," Catherine replied, her voice small. "One that belonged to Lady Edith, I think. He believed it contained clues about the inheritance, about decisions that were never made." Miss Marple nodded slowly, piecing the puzzle together, an old journal potentially filled with secrets that could hinge upon the tangled loyalties of those gathered below. "And did you see anyone else here? Perhaps someone lurking?" Catherine hesitated, the shadows dancing eerily across her features. "Mr. Drummond was here, earlier. He asked too many questions. I thought it odd he'd even come up here. Questions about the journal. Miss Marple's curiosity piqued, a thread of suspicion weaving through her thoughts. And what happened next? They argued. I didn't stay, but I heard them talking about old family matters, debts, all tangled with each other. The girl's voice faltered, eyes searching Miss Marple's face for reassurance. Then I heard a crash, just before the scream. I thought it was a falling bookcase. But then, Miss Marple leaned close, excitement roaring through her as she caught sight of a small, leather-bound book poking from beneath a long-ignored blanket. Gently, she pried it free, revealing the faded initials of Lady Edith printed along the spine. As she opened it, a cascade of yellowed pages unfolded, dense with scrawled notes and erratic handwriting, almost frantic in tone. The pieces were falling into place, but the urgency screamed louder still, pushing her thoughts into a kaleidoscope of fleeting images and possibilities. What is this? Catherine's eyes widened as she leaned closer, squinting at the disjointed notes that described an unseemly family history, laced with betrayal and bitterness. Names intertwined like cruel vines, accusations flaring like bursts of flame in the dark. There was even mention of forbidden love and hidden offspring. It's shocking. Shocking indeed, Miss Marple murmured, tracing a finger carefully over the delicate script. Beneath the surface, a murky pond of family secrets swirled dangerously. Here was a connection to the inheritance argument raging below them, a lit match nearing the powder keg. It appears that everyone has something to gain or lose with Sebastian missing. But a deafening crash interrupted her thought, echoing from below, handed with raw force across the attic's unyielding walls. Miss Marple sprang into action, but not before pulling the journal tightly against her chest, protecting its tenuous wisdom as she rushed to the door with Catherine at her heels. The storm roared, rain pounding atop a marble roof as they descended. The energy of fear vibrating through the air, more tangible than the rain outside. When they reached the staircase landing, they found the others huddled together, faces twisted in suspicion. They cast nervous glances at one another, conjuring shifting shadows against the monochrome tapestry of Halcyon House. The heaviness of guilt loomed over them, palpable and suffocating. "There's been another incident," Miss Marple interjected. "Where's Lady Browning?" Just as she spoke, a figure stepped into the flickering light from the nearby lamp, a silhouette sharp against dark corners, a fire ignited within the storm's solitude. "I was looking for Sebastian," Lady Finch declared, her voice rising, wild with desperation. "He has to be here somewhere. We can't let this go on, not now." "Or perhaps you've hoped he would remain hidden," Drummond countered, the tension cracking like the storm outside. "What if you have something to lose?" "What would I stand to gain from his disappearance?" Lady Finch retorted, voice trembling yet firm, defiance dancing in her eyes like lightning revealed through the veil of rain. Catherine's gaze flicked from one face to another, the air electric, charged with accusations and buried feelings. She stuttered, "We must stop this, before it spirals out of control." Miss Marple felt the contours of the mystery shifting, complexities twisting in her mind like the patterns of thunderous clouds, each revelation sprouting new paths, with limbs reaching into the darkness, shadowy and concealed. She needed to act before the storm claimed not just the house, but all those within it, frightened spirits drawn into a maelstrom of betrayal. "Look!" she cried suddenly, her eyes darting to the narrow stairway leading deeper into the gloom. "We must search the estate with intent. There are truths buried here that no one can afford to hide from any longer." But as she spoke, a sudden scream erupted from somewhere in the depths of the mansion, sharp and breathy, filling the void of thunder. All heads turned, tension snapping like the rain, hearts pounding in synchronized fear. "Lady Browning," Miss Marple whispered, realization dawning. They had only begun to unravel the stitches in the fabric of Halcyon House's haunted story, and now, with another scream echoing through its heart, more than just the past threatened to emerge. With a final jolt of adrenaline, Miss Marple led the charge into the unknown, a wave of tumult and uncertainty trailing in her wake. Secrets clawed for freedom, ready to crash through whatever illusions remained, and in that moment, she knew they were stumbling towards a truth far scarier than the storm itself. Chapter 7. A Whisper from the Dead. A grotesque thud echoed in the stillness of the dimly lit parlor, as if the very walls of Halcyon House were rebelling against the tempest outside. Miss Marple's breath caught in her throat, a chilling premonition, when a sliver of spectral light flickered across the room, illuminating an object tumbling down from a dusty shelf, a moth-eaten diary slapping against the floorboards, the faded cover revealing its tragic title, Memories of a Forgotten Love. She took a cautious step forward, her heart thrumming like the storm against the window panes. Lightning clawed the sky, and she dared a glance toward the shadow that now stood where once there had been emptiness. "Good heavens!" choked a voice from behind her, shattering the tension that hung thick in the air like a curtain of dread. It was Lady Finch, her face a pale crescent in the faint light, and she was biting her lip, anxiety swelling in her eyes like storm clouds. You haven't opened it, have you?" Miss Marple hesitated, noting the wild flutter of Lady Finch's fingers at her side. "Why, not yet. I was merely seeing what had fallen." "Best left undisturbed, I assure you," Lady Finch retorted, her words imbued with an urgency that sent a shudder through the silence. There was something far too fierce in her tone, a sharp edge concealed beneath layers of fear. In that unnerving instant, the essence of betrayal seemed palpable, wafting through the air, as thick as the scent of rain-soaked earth. "Catherine," Miss Marple called to the trembling maid, still lingering in the doorway, "what do you know about this diary?" Catherine recoiled, her eyes wide and glistening, as if caught between loyalty and dread. "It belonged to Lady Edith, Miss Marple. She wrote much about her life. Secrets. There are names scattered throughout, but—" The maid faltered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Many of them should not be spoken aloud." Miss Marple's mind raced, each thought fraying at its edges amid the tumult of emotions that rippled through the room. "We are delving deep into a tangled web, Catherine." She turned her focus back to Lady Finch, whose composure was waning. "Secrets have a way of unearthing darker truths." A storm-tossed chuckle erupted from Mr. Drummond, who leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "And let me guess, you're the one who holds the key to revealing the dead's business. Perhaps you should more worry about whose skeletons lie in the shadows of Halcyon House." His tone dripped with condescension, and Miss Marple couldn't ignore the way Lady Finch's lips tightened in response, yet the unease swelled towards Miss Marple. Had they caught wind of the same secrets? Just as she was about to question further, a sudden crash from the adjacent study fractured the uneasy calm, a splintering of wood clashing with the rumble of thunder outside. "What now?" Miss Marple whispered. The air, heavy with expectation and dread, thickened as they each gaped toward the source of the noise. Before anyone could move, Lady Finch gasped, a pinched expression washing over her. "Lordy, it must be him!" she exclaimed, and though every instinct screamed to press her for clarity, the wild cadence of her breathing left little room for probing. "Who, Lady Finch?" Miss Marple asked, her mind racing through the fog. "I saw Sebastian," Catherine said, almost inaudibly. He was meeting someone before everything collapsed." The girl stumbled over her words, fumbling in and out of clarity like a candle flickering against the howling darkness. "A villager, someone disgraced." Drummond's brow furrowed, crossed arms clenched defensively. "You're talking nonsense, Catherine. Who was he meeting?" "The clockmaker. Hugh lost his license," she replied, a frightened glance towards the shadows, where Hugh's tiny, dilapidated shop sat on the outskirts of the village. "They say he was guilty of fraud." With every murmur, the walls of Halcyon House crept closer as revelations unfurled under the guise of rain pounding the window panes. Miss Marple's mind sharpened. This Hugh's connection to the clock, to time itself, had been profound, hinting at something far deeper. "And yet this clock has become a ghost of its own," she mused, recognizing the potent ties shifting in the air between them. "What do you mean?" Drummond challenged, eyeing Miss Marple with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. "There's a matter of timing in all this," she said, her voice turning steely as logical deductions flooded in from the periphery of her awareness. If Sebastian indeed intended to meet with the disgraced villager, it stands to reason that their clandestine meeting could stir the contents of this tattered diary into a frenzy. The implications danced in the air, delicate like the fragile paper of the diary. "Enough talk of diaries. The storm has rattled the very soul of this house," barked Lady Finch, but her resolve was crumbling, swept away by the contradiction of her own fear and urgency. Just then, a piercing scream slashed through the cacophony outside, rising above the storm's roar, a terrible, heart-wrenching sound that seemed to vibrate from the very marrow of the manor. Miss Marple's heart raced as she exchanged frantic looks with the others, every pulse of fear radiating against the walls of Halcyon House like a relentless tide. "That scream," she breathed, trembling at the intangible connection binding them. It was not merely a cry of terror, but a call to something far darker than they realize. Catherine's face blanched further, and Drummond's facade faltered. "Lady Browning," he whispered, eyes wide with dread. Without a word, Miss Marple took decisive steps towards the doorway, heart beating fiercely as she pushed into the stormy night, torn between myriad truths and fabrications whispering from the shadows, urging her towards the source of that dreadful sound. The world beyond pulsed with dark possibilities, and she knew this night was only beginning to reveal its deadly secrets. With the rain slicing at her heels, she pressed into the gloom, determined to confront whatever awaited in the heart of the tempest, as another piece of the puzzle threatened to crack the fragile facade of sanity among them. And with these renewed convictions racing through her, a thunderous silence followed the scream. The shadows in Halcyon House were about to unfurl, and Miss Marple was standing at the precipice of an unspeakable revelation. Chapter 8. The Secret, Beneath the Staircase. A jagged piece of wood jutted from beneath the grand staircase, stained crimson and marked with dark smudges that were far too familiar, too damning. As Miss Marple knelt to investigate, The storm outside wailed, the walls of Halcyon House trembling as if to warn her against what she might uncover. The air was heavy with the scent of dampness and fear, and in that charged silence, an ill-omened drumming seemed to echo in her ears, fueled by ominous thunder that groaned in the distance. The flash of lightning illuminated the scene for a fleeting moment, and there it was again, the unmistakable chill that twisted around her heart. She was close to the truth, but that truth now felt darker than night. She heard footsteps approaching, irregular and hurried, and even before she turned, she knew they belonged to Lady Finch, who had grown increasingly agitated since they regrouped after Lady Browning's terrible scream. "What are you doing down there?" Lady Finch's voice sliced through the tension, veined with concern that belied her earlier bravado. "You mustn't touch anything you find." Miss Marple, however, was already beyond the reach of fear, drawn into the mystery brewing at their feet. With a slight pressure, she pressed the edge of the timber, revealing not only its gruesome hint of blood, but a small iron latch that seemed to lead deeper into the darkness below the staircase. "This is quite significant," she murmured, more to herself than Lady Finch. "How curious indeed that something so ominous should remain hidden here." Lady Finch's face paled, showcasing the rawness of her nerves. "Are you mad? We shouldn't be meddling in what's better left unfound. If anyone sees you—" She didn't finish, the implication hanging heavily in the air. "They might think you involved." "Involved? As if I have a choice in the matter," Miss Marple retorted, though her voice remained measured, finger tracing the jagged outline of the latch. "But the truth must come to light, whether we wish it to or not. It connects us all, more than mere accusations and whispers." With a firm pull, she unlatched the wooden panel, the creak reverberating like thunder itself. A musty smell wafted forth, making her recoil for but a moment, though determination warred against fear. They were in too deep, and now there was no turning back. Kneeling further, Miss Marple reached into the darkness and drew forth a bundle wrapped in a damp piece of yellowed cloth. The corner of the cloth slipped away, revealing a cache of letters. Their ink faded, yet still legible, scrawled in hurried strokes, a cacophony of love, loss, and betrayal spilling forth like the tempest outside. "Where did you find those?" Lady Finch whispered hoarsely, her eyes widening as she moved to peer closer, though she stopped short of crossing the threshold into the realm Miss Marple had begun to unravel. "I have no doubt they belong to Lady Edith," Miss Marple declared, holding them aloft like a trophy before entombing secrets. The sender's name inked upon them, John Ashworth, a name I recall whispering through the ages, an old flame that cast long shadows. This could change everything. "John Ashworth?" Lady Finch's voice trembled, and she took a cautious step back, as if struck by the ghost of his name. "He is dead, isn't he? I think I remember reading about him. Some scandal long ago." "Exactly. Tragic, and yet telling, wouldn't you say? An affair that surely created ripples through Halcyon House, yet the question remains, why keep these letters hidden beneath the stairs?" Miss Marple's sharp gaze darted towards the others, her instincts igniting, for the psychological game they found themselves entangled in was far from over. "I cannot bring these to light, Miss Marple." Lady Finch's reaction was immediate, a smile flashing across her face that did little to mask the anxiety beneath. "We must think of the repercussions. You don't know what you're involving yourself in with those letters." "Or perhaps it's you who does know too well," Miss Marple countered, her eyes narrowing. The thrill of the chase ignited more fervently within her. Lady Finch's frantic demeanor bore witness to something she was not sharing, adding one more layer to the complications swirling around them. Why this urgency? What lies between you and the memories inked on these pages? The accusation hung palpably, but before Lady Finch could respond, a guttural crash vibrated through the house, sending tremors rippling beneath their feet. An invisible pulse of tension surged as one of the other guests, perhaps Drummond or perhaps Sebastian, she could not tell, broke through their quiet, dislocated haven. Shadows danced in the light, their faces transformed into masks of alarm. Miss Marple stood, clutching the letters tightly against her chest as they withdrew their breaths in silent horror. "We cannot hide from the past any longer, Lady Finch. Whatever sins lay entwined beneath this roof must come to fruition, and I suspect these letters hold a crucial key." "No, we must not," Lady Finch hissed. "You don't understand what you're putting at risk." The warning spilled forth like a river, tumbling relentlessly against the dam of tension between them. Yet Miss Marple's resolve remained unshaken. They were unbearably close to penetrating the layers of deceit, each word of those letters promising revelations that could set flame to the lies cloaking Halcyon House. "Do you think I fear the murmurs of the past? They've haunted me for far too long," Miss Marple propounded, her voice steady. "But it's those murmurs we must confront before they drown us all." The storm resumed its rage outside as a frantic knock echoed against the front door, and the uneasy guests exchanged nervous glances. Who or what could be waiting on the other side? Were they ready to confront yet another layer of the mystery, one that could reveal truths far worse than a mere hidden cache beneath a grand staircase? Miss Marple's heart raced with exhilaration, mingling with trepidation. "Stay here for now," she instructed, striding toward the door, clenching tightly to the letters that held their secrets within. "But remember, not all whispers are benign, and some terrors are very much alive." As the door creaked open to meet the darkness beyond, the weight of those words echoed within her, the wind howling like a spectre seeking revenge, embroiled in a tapestry of past misdeeds. Something violent and electric surged into the room as she set it ajar, reality hanging by a mere thread, one that could snap at any moment, a breathless moment standing upon the verge of another unthinkable revelation. Chapter 9. The Final Trap. A sharp crack echoed through Halcyon House, slicing through the murmurs of concern as the chandelier overhead swung violently, showering shimmering light across the tense faces huddled together in the drawing room. Miss Marple's heart raced, for the reverberation was reminiscent of the very storm that raged outside, yet this disturbance was no mere act of nature. It was a clarion call, signaling the unsettling play that was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice firm but soft, coaxing their attention like a moth toward a flickering flame. "It is time we confront the truths that have lingered in the shadows. Tonight, we unveil the hidden threads binding us, the tapestry of secrets that you each hold." Uneasiness hung thick in the air like an omen, and the silent acknowledgement of fear flickered in their eyes, hinting at dread that rippled through even the most stoic among them. As she motioned the guests to take their seats, the storm outside crescendoed, rattling the windows with icy fingers, mirroring the tempest brewing in the hearts of those gathered. The flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows that twisted along the walls, painting an arena of unease, and Miss Marple moved gracefully through the audience, the cache of letters she had discovered hidden beneath the staircase, nestled protectively within her grasp. Each envelope bore the weight of untold stories of love, betrayal, and past scandals, and she intended to unveil them tonight like a magpie revealing its treasure. Lady Finch's brow glistened with sweat as she leaned forward, the nervous energy radiating from her like a low hum of static electricity. "What do we need to discuss, Miss Marple?" she inquired, feigned nonchalance clashing with the tremor in her tone. "Surely there is no need for such drama after all that has transpired." A glimmer of defiance flickered in her gaze, and Miss Marple noted it with silent appreciation. It revealed more than the woman meant to divulge. Miss Marple's eyes swept across the room, landing upon Drummond, whose air of stoic detachment belied the flicker of something darker lurking behind his eyes. "Indeed, my lady, but the drama has already been written, and what remains is simply the act of unveiling. Each of you has played your part, and tonight we will discover who holds the knife amidst the shadows." Drummond's lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach those eyes, masking fear with amusement. "Really, Miss Marple, how terribly theatrical. Are we to believe a mere diary and letters could contain the truth of this dreadful affair?" He pressed, testing her resolve, even as unease weaved itself into the fabric of their gathering. "Ah, but Mr. Drummond," she countered, allowing a knowing smile to unfurl upon her face, "it is often the most innocuous things, a diary, a letter, that reveal the most monstrous of truths." She gestured toward their companions. "For instance, consider the profound impact of betrayal. It can sever ties far deeper than blood itself." A faint murmur of anxiety drifted through the room. As the guests glanced toward one another, reckless speculations dawning like shadows, leaping along the edges of their minds. Among them, Catherine's complexion had turned a ghostly hue, an impression of guilt seeping through her tightly drawn lips. "Miss Marple," she interjected, "must we truly descend into this? The storm outside has agitated passions, but the weight of such accusations could very well prove disastrous." "Disastrous like death?" Miss Marple replied, her tone soft yet pointed. "After all, it was not merely the storm that claimed a life, was it, my dear Catherine?" She paused for effect, allowing her words to hang dangerously in the thick atmosphere. Let us not forget Lady Browning's scream, a harbinger of truths, long buried, but perhaps not forgotten. Cries of protest erupted from within the group, but Miss Marple continued, unwavering, beckoning to each person with the flicker of her gaze. Sebastian stood, stony, silent, a chiseled statue on the periphery. Lady Finch clutched her cup, knuckles white, and a quiet, simmering rage flared behind Drummond's sharp smile. "I have spent considerable time studying those letters," she continued, and slowly drew them out, cradled in her trembling hands like fragile, somber bouquets. "I learned that Lady Edith, a name that reverberates through this house as both cherished and condemned, had much to hide, and more pointedly, John Ashworth's name absorbed a scandal that stretches beyond mere passion." Each name she spoke sent a ripple of unrest through the guests, the atmosphere thickening as if a storm cloud had descended within the same four walls. "Tonight," she breathed deeply, the very air between them charged, "I will reveal what lies hidden. Truths that threaten to shatter the illusions we've all clung to." Just as she began to peel back the layers on the first letter, the ground beneath them shook violently, a tremor that resonated through the floorboards, and a third, more jarring crack echoed through the corridor beyond, the sound of a door breaking open. The guests' heads snapped toward the hallway in unison, hearts pounding in anxious unison. A dark figure emerged through the thick veil of the storm, drenched and wild, silhouetted against the flicker of lightning outside. Breathless gasps filled the room as the figure stepped into the light, revealing not just a face, but an expression that told of panic and dread. It was Sebastian, face haggard, breathless, eyes wide with terror. "What happened?" The words spilled from his mouth, frantic. "They've found something. Something horrible," he gasped. And with those words, a collective pressure of apprehension tightened around them, like a noose, clutching at the fragile threads of dread that had woven their way through the evening. Before he could continue, a thunderous crash ripped through his sentence, an intrusion from the tempest outside that sent all eyes darting toward the window as the glass shattered under the force of the wind, raining shards of crystal across the polished floor. "There's no time. We must—" Sebastian's urgent plea was cut short, drawing bewildered stares from the assembled guests, and then he froze, realization dawning, eyes darting to the open door. In that moment, terror ignited as a figure slipped through the broken glass, suffocated by looming darkness, distorted by a veil of shadows. Miss Marple clutched the letter tightly, her pulse quickening as she recognized the face merging with the false panic that gripped the gathering. A collective gasp filled the air, voices blending in a clamor of fear as the figure stepped into the room. The inexorable weight of tense anticipation clung to them all, electric with the promise of revelation, and then, just as that final truth lingered on the edge of exposure, a chilling scream echoed through the hallways anew, a scream that held a deeper portent of death itself. Miss Marple's eyes widened, realization crashing down like the relentless rain outside. Someone was about to be revealed, but the question hung heavy. Would it bring the ultimate revelation, or would it seal their fates in a singular, momentous tragedy? And who among them, if anyone, would emerge from the night alive? The storm raged on, but within the confines of Halcyon House, the swirling tempest of treachery had just begun to unfurl. Chapter 10. The Truth Buried in the Garden. A blood-curdling scream shattered the tense atmosphere of Halcyon House, reverberating through the opulent corridors and into the very soul of every inhabitant within its walls. Miss Marple, standing poised with a trembling letter clutched in her palm, felt her heart leap into her throat, an indignant rush flooding her senses as she turned toward the sound. The chilling wail echoed again, rippling through the guests like a living entity determined to strip away their pretense. They became hushed shadows, wide-eyed and paralyzed, their mouths agape in collective horror. "Who screamed?" someone asked, voice trembling, quickly swallowed by the storm's relentless howl battering the windows as if nature itself conspired to cloak their fears. Without a word, Miss Marple stepped forward, motioning for silence while her resolute demeanor encased the others. The pounding of rain against glass turned from a rhythmic lull to a disjointed symphony, matching the chaotic tempo of their anxiety. Leaning in with the fragile notes of the reverberating scream still vibrating through the air, she noticed the familiar figure flinching in the doorway, Catherine, white as a ghost, her eyes wide pools of something unnameable, either fear or guilt. "Catherine, what has happened?" Miss Marple questioned gently, though the urgency in her voice was unmissable. "What have you seen?" It was as though a pebble had been cast into a still pond, creating ripples of tension that quickly engulfed the room. Sebastian, caught in the despair of his own revelations and glistening from the storm's embrace, echoed too frantically, "We shouldn't remain here. You all must come." Before Miss Marple could press for details, the sudden urge to investigate drew her to the garden beyond the door, where shadows danced erratically in the intermittent flash of lightning. "We must go, now," she insisted, locking eyes with Lady Finch, whose fervent expression oscillated between worry and something darker lurking beneath the surface. The others methodically gravitated toward the threshold, the remnants of their composure fraying with each labored breath on the cusp of pronouncement. The outdoor air was thick with the scent of damp earth, the night pulsating beneath them, heavy with the storm's burden. Raindrops fell like shattered glass against the verdant expanse that lay stretched before them, illuminated in sharp cuts by fearsome bursts of lightning. To Miss Marple, the weather felt almost threatening. As they crossed the threshold into the garden's depths, she felt the pulse of dread suspended in her chest. Even the flowers shivered beneath the onslaught. "Look!" Sebastian suddenly cried, his voice rising above the tempest like a plea for salvation. He gestured toward a small enclave enveloped in overgrown rose bushes, their petals bleeding colors that shone eerily in the dim light. A pile of earth had been hastily disturbed, a mound that seemed to breathe under the pressure of the rain. Miss Marple approached calmly, her intuition igniting beneath the caress of cold droplets, while fear surged through the others, paralyzing their steps. As she knelt beside the teeming soil, her hands met the dampness, fingers digging into the loam, uncovering the debris of some secret long hidden. There lay a fragment of fabric, rich red, silk glimmering momentarily before being consumed by shadow. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. She recognized the fabric, too fine for mere garden attire. "This is Lady Edith's gown," she murmured, her brow furrowing in distinct contemplative focus, each word soaked in portent. The whispers of possibilities tangled wildly in her mind as horror swept through the others, their expressions vacant and gaping. Is that... Lady Finch stammered, struggling against the weight of her own dawning horror. "Do you think it could be from—" "Yes," Miss Marple interrupted briskly, eyes narrowing, already piecing together the cascading implications. "But it's not the fabric that concerns me as much as what lies beneath." She delved deeper, dragging aside dirt and roots, unearthing a small, brittle box smeared in aeons of dark soil. As she pried it open, the sound of caked earth crumbling echoed with a finality that sent shivers up the spines of all gathered. Inside, nestled like lost secrets, were letters sealed with wax, each marked with the distinct crest of Ashworth, an emblem entwined with eager gossip and whispered intrigue. A veil of silence descended on the garden, thick as the tendrils of the approaching storm at sea. The others huddled close, breathless, eyes darting furtively between Miss Marple and the letters, a compulsion turning their curiosity into culpability. Finally, it was Sebastian who shattered the spell, his voice almost pleading. "What do they say? Who do they implicate?" "Ah, my dear," Miss Marple murmured softly as she lifted a fragile piece to the shadows. "That is precisely what we must uncover, isn't it? But I sense there is a deeper shade of motive here." The storm lashed about them as uncertainty coiled. Suspicions slithered from face to face, revealing depths that lay hidden beneath their carefully curated facades. The storm outside grew ever more violent, and the garden felt like hallowed ground where truth and treachery would unfurl. "But what if you are mistaken?" Drummond inserted, stepping forward, his brow slick with tension as he challenged her, his own demeanor betraying the high stakes. "What if this fabric has no connection at all? What if—" But his protest fell short, stilled by fear. The ferocity of the storm was nothing compared to the violent storm brewing within the souls of each guest. As Miss Marple began to carefully sift through each carefully handwritten letter, another blinding flash erupted in the sky, illuminating the garden. The letters fluttered in her grasp, like anxious birds, and as she unfolded the first one, eyes widened in horrified recognition, words scrawled in frantic handwriting, near illegibility but unmistakably laden with perilous intent. "Knew too much. I must act before she exposes everything. The truth cannot come to light." A tense silence enfolded the group anew, disbelief mounting. "Who is this about?" Catherine hissed, her voice trembling as she leaned in closer. The storm's ferocity dimmed by her urgent desire to know more. "That may depend on what you aren't telling us," Miss Marple challenged gently, incisively, as the garden flared with electric tension. "Each of you holds a thread of this tapestry, and though a portion lies buried here, its patterns continue to weave." But suddenly, a high-pitched, frantic scream sliced through the night again, this time distinct and filled with a raw terror that sent chills racing down everyone's spines. The garden was alive with whispers of betrayal, but the heart-stopping horror was just beginning as the group turned in unison toward the source of the sound, the door to Halcyon House swinging open yet again. "Stay back," someone screamed, arms flailing as shadows surged from within, and Miss Marple felt the cold fingers of dread clutch at her heart. They were all teetering on the precipice now. A single slip could plunge them irrevocably into the depths of their own secrets. A movement flickered, a figure tumbling into sight, drenched by the storm but unmistakably familiar. But it wasn't just newcomer terror that gripped her. It was the unmistakable expression of someone who had finally come undone. And as she stepped closer into the pale light, Miss Marple gasped. The pale sheen of blood on the hem of the figure's garment smeared the ground beneath them, an omen of everything they battled to keep buried beneath the garden's damp soil. "Someone must die tonight," the figure gasped, voice raw as the truth clutched at her throat. Miss Marple's heart thundered within her chest as realization crashed over her like a wave, a grim anchor that shifted everything irrevocably. "The storm hasn't revealed all secrets yet," she whispered as the night swallowed the air around them, fraying tethers holding it all together, and looming with the ominous threat of havoc yet to come. Chapter 11. The Confession. No one heard. A pale hand shot forth from the drenched shadows, grasping a sturdy, rusted lantern and casting a trembling glow upon the bewildered faces surrounding Halcyon House. The rain fell in torrents, a symphony of chaos that disguised the frantic ripple of fear framing the scene. Miss Marple, her heart drumming a tempestuous rhythm, stepped closer, straining against the dark. It was Charlotte, her trembling hands slick with rain and dread, who had brought the terrible secret tumbling into the light, the blood on her hem sparkling ominously like a dark star amid the swirling storm. Gasps cut through the rattling of the windows. Miss Marple's analytical gaze shifted from the fabric's gleam to Charlotte's wide, frightened eyes, and she sensed the weight of shifting allegiances in the gathered crowd. "Charlotte, what have you done?" Miss Marple implored, threading her voice through the swelling din of raindrops. Her tone was curt, yet imbued with an undercurrent of compassion, a delicate invitation veiled beneath the gravity of the question. "Why are you covered in blood?" "I didn't mean to. I found her." The words burst from Charlotte's lips like a shattered dam. The urgency in her voice, a moth fluttering desperately against an unforgiving flame. "She was just lying there and—" Her voice broke, the horror dawning upon her like the relentless storm, indomitable and inescapable. "Lying where?" Catherine, her voice sharp and edged, pursued the thought with a fervor born of both fear and fascination. Her hands twisted together, catching rainwater in a subtle, bird-like gesture, revealing the tension in her demeanor. "You know something, don't you? Speak." "I do," Charlotte wailed, her hands covering her face like a veil of desperation. "This is all my fault. I thought I could stop her. She was going to ruin us all." Around them, the air thickened with confusion as a chorus of disjointed murmurs erupted. Did she refer to Lady Edith? The whispers slithered among the party like shadows in the flickering lantern light, knitting a web of suspicion that tightened around each guest's neck. Miss Marple inhaled the cold, damp air, feeling the pulse of dread echoing through the garden as she pivoted to gauge the reactions of the others, each face revealing an intricate tapestry of raw emotion. Sebastian's brow knitted in perplexity, and his hands gripped the edges of his soaked coat, as if holding on to the last vestiges of his equilibrium. "What do you mean, ruin us all?" he demanded, his voice rising above the tension, laced with a frantic edge of disbelief. Charlotte's shoulders shook. She seemed fractured, a delicate porcelain doll, facing the inevitability of shattering. "I couldn't let her expose the truth. I thought she knew everything." A finger of lightning arced across the sky, illuminating a glint of metal among the roses. Miss Marple's keen eyes caught its questionable relevance, her mind flickering anew to the letters still clutched in her grasp. "And what truth might that be?" she probed, carefully threading doubt among the strands of Charlotte's assertions. She was going to tell everyone. The letters, the stolen money, all of it. Charlotte's confession rushed out in a gale, but her eagerness to cast blame reflected a deeper, self-serving tint. Stolen money. Drummond stepped forward, incredulity etched deep into the furrows of his brow, resolutely pressing against the fragility of the moment. "You must be mistaken. Surely she would not have pursued such an act. Wouldn't she?" Charlotte turned defiantly to Drummond, a flash of anger sparking in bloodshot eyes. "Everyone in this cursed place has something to hide, and she was going to expose us all." The storm rumbled overhead, amplifying the anxiety pulsing amongst the guests. Within the growing tension, Miss Marple saw deeper motives swirling just beneath the surface of Charlotte's words, a current of fear and impulse wrapped around contrived indignation. "Yet you seem quite quick to confess, dear Charlotte," she remarked, her tone gentle but steely, a subtle counterpoint to the turmoil roiling within the gathering. "Why, one might even suspect that such urgency for absolution hints at deeper complicity." Charlotte's gaze flickered. It was a brief, yet dangerous hesitation that did not go unnoticed. A crack of thunder punctuated the air, and even at this moment, a moment ensconced in high drama, the storm roared, interrupting their frenetic discourse. The atmosphere narrowed, prickling with anticipation as each guest weighed Miss Marple's suspicion against their fear. "If Lady Edith is indeed dead," Sebastian began, but his words fell like rope, slipped from grasping hands, leaving the implications swirling ominously through the air. I never meant for this to happen." Charlotte's voice wavered, the panic hanging like a shroud, belief and doubt both igniting in her eyes. "You must believe me. I tried to talk to her, but she pushed me away. And then—" "Then what?" Catherine hissed, a snake coiling ever tighter as the illusion of control persisted among the terrified guests. "You just concealed her body and returned here. Quite the choice, I must say." A twisted smile crossed Charlotte's lips, darkened by the grief etched into her features. "I didn't kill her. She wouldn't die if I had—" "Then why?" Miss Marple interjected, her voice a low, taut thread drawn across the stormy tableau. "Why is it you speak of her death so easily, as though you anticipated it? You did not know at first that she was dead, yet now you speak as though—" A sudden illumination cascaded from the heavens, creeping shadows darting across the faces, revealing the stark truth behind Charlotte's facade. Miss Marple honed in. There lay the kernel of insight which might unravel the tightly woven web, and she was mere moments away from discerning the full breadth of the truth. Before she could take hold of that insight, an unearthly scream shattered the tension anew, rising from the direction of the house, a cold, sharp sound echoing long into the night. A second figure, frantic and drenched, burst through the doorway, and Miss Marple's heart plummeted. Their terror radiated like an infection, spreading through the crowd. "Lady Finch," she whispered, dread pooling in her stomach, "what have you seen?" The storm roared its tumultuous answer, and the revelation hung perilously by a thread. Would it reveal the intricate web of guilt, or would it plunge them deeper into the shadows? The evening's grimy underbelly quivered, and the confessions that swirled now promised nothing short of more chaos, more death. "Something dreadful has happened." Lady Finch gasped, a ghastly pallor stark against the storm-tossed backdrop. Thunder crackled overhead as Miss Marple took a resolute step forward, knowing they stood at the brink of a revelation, and perhaps a new contradiction yet to unspool. The questions beckoned with fierce urgency, ensnaring all in their throes as the night thickened around them threateningly, secrets yet unexposed tangled in the imminent tide of truth. Chapter 12. The clock strikes. Justice. A cold, blood-curdling scream pierced the stillness, shattering the tense atmosphere like glass, leaving behind an echo that reverberated into the hearts of all present, their gaze snapping toward the figure that had just recoiled from the house's threshold, horror etched across her face. Lady Finch, her silky black hair plastered against her skull, stood panting in the rain, eyes wide and unseeing. She's gone," she stammered, her voice a trembling leaf caught in the gale, prompting a fresh wave of murmurs among the gathering, like crows taking flight in the dark. "Lady Edith, she's missing, and there's blood everywhere." The lantern flickered, casting an uneasy glow upon the gathering sea of stricken faces, caught in a web they could neither grasp nor escape. Miss Marple strained to discern the truth within Lady Finch's frenzied words. This was not a mere cry of panic, but a clarion call of deepest dread. The rain mingled with the desperate gasps of the crowd, combining into a symphony rife with confusion and burgeoning chaos. "Blood?" Miss Marple echoed, her voice steady, drilling into the core of the situation with precision. "You had best elaborate, Lady Finch. Where exactly did you find this blood?" "Inside, in the drawing room. It looked, oh God, like it belonged to her." The words spilled from Lady Finch in a rush, and her pallid features glimmered in the lantern light, questioning and imploring. She swayed slightly, as if preparing to succumb to the stormy winds of her own anguish. She was fighting. I could hear them, but I was too frightened to go closer. I didn't think anything like this could happen. Fighting? Who? Miss Marple pressed, her intuition firing with rapid clarity. The pieces of this tumultuous puzzle were coalescing under her discerning gaze. You must be more specific, dear Lady Finch. Were you referring to Charlotte? Do you think she— No, not Charlotte, Lady Finch interjected, an unexpected fury igniting the embers of her fear. I could hear them, a loud argument. Charlotte was with her, yes, but someone else was there as well. Someone much darker. A flicker of doubt crossed her features as her eyes darted toward the silhouette of the house, and the tremor in her voice mirrored the rolling storm. I didn't see who— At that juncture, a slow, insidious realization enveloped Miss Marple, the unspoken dread coiling tightly around her heart like a serpent. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled as disparate threads of suspicion, now pointedly threaded with Lady Finch's peculiar revelation, nudged her awareness. Someone darker, she muttered, as the echoes of previous conversations unfurled in her mind. Do you mean to suggest that Charlotte was not alone? Scrutiny sharpened the air as Charlotte let out an anguished moan, those wide, terrified eyes revealing an edge of desperation. I didn't kill her. You have to believe me, she cried, desperation spilling into her voice, an utterance of anguish that could scarcely be discerned from the relentless battering of rain upon the soil. I was terrified. She knew everything. Yet you were the one with blood on your hands, Catherine interjected, her voice manic with accusation. How do we know you didn't force her into a fight because you were panicking? What I know is that an argument took place, Miss Marple interjected firmly, weaving between the friends and enemies forming in this tempest of distrust. Charlotte, if fighting took place, it would be prudent to ascertain what was exchanged in that heated moment. Tell me everything you remember. Charlotte hesitated, and Miss Marple seized the opportunity. You must think back. What happened right before the fight? Follow every detail, no matter how trivial. The minutiae matter more than you realize. I saw her push Charlotte back. Charlotte's voice trembled, yet the recollection ignited a spark of clarity. She said, You don't know how deep the lies run. Stop this now, or the truth will ruin you. And then they were at it, shouting, Before you fled the scene, Miss Marple countered, sharpening the focus as she probed. Was it fear that propelled you away? Please, recount every second that preceded your departure, no matter how it may make you look. I was shocked. I couldn't fathom it. Lady Edith was furious. No one had dared speak to her that way. And then she glanced toward the fireplace, Charlotte continued, words tripping over each other, as though she saw some terrible truth reflected in the flames. I just didn't know what to think. The letters, they were gone. Her tone, it was maddening. A significant shift took root. The letters? Miss Marple asked, her focus intensifying. What letters? The ones in her drawer. The ones she threatened to use against us. I meant to rescue them, but— Charlotte's face contorted in horror as if realizing the full weight of her admissions. I left the house like she wanted me to. That's when I found her. On the floor. Miss Marple's mind raced through the implications. Lightning flashed ominously, illuminating the figure of Bastian, who had remained quiet, lurking behind a veil of unyielding calmness. In that moment, the shadows pooled around him, and she caught a glint of metal that drew her gaze, a small knife glistening with rainwater and something darker, a remnant of the chaos, possibly a tool of betrayal. Her heart quickened. It pierced her convictions. "Bastian," she began, locking onto him, "you must tell us. You were present during the fight, were you not? What were your intentions that night?" But before she could demand further, a blinding flash illuminated the scene, plunging them into heightened clarity as the house's door swung partially open again, revealing a figure that had been lurking just beyond the threshold, absorbing every interaction. The once innocent Vivian, her countenance marred with resolve and terror. "No one will escape tonight. Not until the truth is told," she shouted, her voice breaking over the crack of thunder. The ground seemed to shake beneath them as breathless silence encompassed the group, each gasp clinging to the moist air, staggering heavily as Vivian stepped further into the glow of the lantern, her eyes wild with purpose. "You will all hear the truth before this night is done." In the heartbeat that followed, Miss Marple's world narrowed down violently upon the inference of that declaration. She understood now. The layers were peeling back, and the heart of the matter was treacherous, tangled in vengeful shadows. But before she could respond or unravel the torrent of revelations before her, the piercing scream of a woman echoed through the darkness once more, and the lights in Halcyon House flickered, extinguishing the last assurances of safety. "Justice will strike before the clock strikes 12, echoed in vivacious defiance. A footfalls thundered behind her, a presence igniting shards of fear and anticipation as she turned, realizing that deep-seated truths stood within reach, if only she could quell the tempest brewing within Halcyon House. And then the storm surged with a howling fury that rendered every soul paralyzed, and at the same electrifying moment, a crash resounded from within, the long latent darkness about to burst forth with a vengeance, leaving justice hanging precariously by its last thread.